Welcome to part 2 of the interview with Verne Bubbles Starbuck. In this segment of the interview, Verne remembers growing up on the farm and the work that was involved, and also recalls the hard times of the 1930s.
Nowadays, you get everything in plastic.
Yes.
Plastic was unheard of in those days. And my father had a big machine that would staple through wood. We would buy packages of cut fruit boxes for strawberries and raspberries, only they would come out in a sheet. And he would have us kids come down. Well, we soaked the wood overnight. Then we'd have the kids come down, and we would fold those boxes, and they looked just like the plastic ones today for raspberries and strawberries when you got through. And then we would hand them to my father, and he would sit at the machine and staple so it wouldn't come apart for the next year's crop. So he kept us busy.
I'll say.
Year.
So none of that laying off in the wintertime.
With 10 children, you kept kids busy.
So where did he get that work ethic? What's his story?
His father was a garden farmer in Wheat Ridge, too, so he learned it from his father.
So where did those people come from? Where did they immigrate from?
Well, my grandparents are from Nebraska, by way of Ohio and Indiana and Illinois.
What's your maiden name?
Morris.
Morris. Have the Morrises been in the United States for generations?
Yes.
Where did they come from originally?
Well, England. My father always said that we were descendants of the ones who signed the Declaration of Independence. And I spent about 20 years trying to validate that. And I got back to the 1830 and couldn't go any further back. I would get records from Indiana and Illinois that the courthouse had burned or something, and so I have not been able to verify that.
Dead ends. What about your mother?
No, she was a first generation German. My grandparents on her side were from Germany, and she and my grandmother spoke German, but my mother would not teach us German because she said, "You're American citizens, you learn English." So we never learned that. But I'm a third generation German.
What was her maiden name?
Voss, B-O-S-S.
B-O-S-S.
Emma Voss. Mm-hmm.
So they both came to this union with work. Work is a strong ethic that they passed on to you kids.
Yes. My grandfather Voss was a railroad man, and they built railroad cars, but he also helped lay the track. And that's how they came to the Denver area, was with the railroad.
So these strawberry boxes, they must have been hell for stout, as they say, huh? They were wooden boxes. They probably would last forever.
I think it was balsam.
Yeah. So it was
because it was very pliable when wet. You know, you just folded them up to what they look like right now in the store.
Right.
That are plastic.
Yeah.
But
I think I've seen a version of that before. But
I saved maybe half a dozen, and we would put 12 of them in a flat. That's how you sold the strawberries and the raspberries, 12 of them in a flat. And down through the years, I saved one of those flats with a few of those boxes and gave them to the Silt Museum.
What was the hard time? What was the hard time like at your house? You were raising vegetable crop, but during the 30s when things were pretty rugged, weren't they?
Well, that's when we got a penny a pound for asparagus. And if we got 90 cents a flat for tomatoes, and my mother would crate the tomatoes, and you see that the same way coming into the stores now, the same way. You face the tomato up, and the flat was about like this and like this.
About a foot by a foot.
90 cents. 90 cents was the most we ever got for tomatoes. And then when in World War II, when we began to have a demand for food, and more people went back to work in the factories and so forth. When we got 3 cents a pound for asparagus, we thought we were rich. And then before the war was over, we got 15 cents a pound. Now when you go to buy it at the store, that's $4.
No, it's a delicacy
Yeah.
at this point. Yeah, it's luxury food. So do you remember a particular hard time?
You know, I knew we were poor, but we had plenty to eat because we raised it. And we had a cow, and my father would save the calf, and we would have beef. We raised our own chickens. We raised our own pigs. So that part of it, we had no feeling for being destitute.
Right.
But I got 1 pair of shoes. I didn't have a store-bought dress until I was in 6th grade. All my clothing were made from the older boys, or really the older girls' dresses. And my mother bought flour in 100-pound sacks because she was feeding so many people. She had to bake 5 loaves of bread a day to feed us. So we went through a lot of flour. But the flour sacks were, if you bought the same brand, you could get the same design on the cloth that the flour came in.
Right.
And you buy 200-pound sacks, she could get a dress out for me. Or if she just had white, she had used those for dishcloths or making our underwear. So that way, yes, I knew we sacrificed.
I understand that the flour company realized pretty early on that people were using it
Yes.
as material, and
Yeah.
they decorated it. So there were floral designs and things, weren't
Yes.
there? So
And then we lived not too far from the railroad, and to see the number of people migrating by riding the rails was very, very sad. They had to kind of slow down as they passed our farm, and they would jump off at times, the men, there were never any ladies, but the men, and they would come to our door wanting food because they saw that we were a vegetable farm. And my mother would make sure that they took food along with them, and she always gave them a cup of coffee. Now, how we got the coffee, I can't remember, but she always gave them a cup of coffee and a sack to take along.
So
And then they would go back down to the railroad, and when the train slowed down again, they'd get back on and go. But it was very sad, and sometimes, it'd be 10 or 15 men a day.
when you say these, how many men did you see on a car when they would pass by?
We got so used to seeing them that I didn't think about ever counting to see how many, but it was quite a few and very sad.
Were there camps nearby, like
We would see
Hooverville?
we would see fires at night, yes, but not very often. If they missed the train, if they missed getting back on the next freight that went by, then they would stay and have a fire, but they would be gone in the morning.
Were you ever afraid of those guys?
We always hid. My mother said, we don't know them, but however, a lot of them asked if they could help to pay for what my mother did for them. And my father kind of rejected that because we didn't know them. But many of them did offer to help. So I'm sure they were good people, just destitute to try and find some way to live.
Yes. Do you have memories or stories of the Dust Bowl? I mean, you lived
No.
Denver was on the edge of it, but
Yes, I don't know because we had irrigation water and we had a good water right from the farmer's ditch.
so you always had water. So
Yes.
every year was a pretty decent crop
Yes.
of food. It was the problem was trying to get a nickel or a dime
yes,
for it.
Yes. My mother canned nothing less than 300 quarts of tomatoes a year or 300 quarts of green beans so that we had food through the winter. So,
Amazing.
yes. I don't know how we
Yeah,
did
the
it.
fall was there was plenty of work in the fall for
Oh,
the
yeah.
when the
Mm-hmm.
food started to
Mm-hmm.
become due. You said that you had your clothing made from your older brothers and sisters' clothing.
Mm-hmm.
How would your mom fashion clothing for you out of your older brothers and sisters' clothing?
Well, if they had a full skirt, it'd do pretty good. She could get a dress out of a full skirt for me.
So the
So,
big girl had a full skirt. That would make
yeah.
a pretty good dress for a little
Mm-hmm.
girl.
And she'd save the bodice and just cut the bodice down and then add, do whatever it did to fit me.
How many bedrooms did you have in your house?
How many what?
How many bedrooms?
Well, there were 2 upstairs and 2 downstairs. We slept 4 to a bed sideways
4 to a bed.
because my grandfather had one, my mother and father had one, so it only left the other 2 for the rest of us. We had one bed down the basement for my older brother, and then the rest of us slept side by side, crosswise of the bed. In the summertime, it was easy. We'd go out and sleep on the haystack or take beds outside and sleep.
I bet there was some elbowing that went on during.
Oh, dear. It was
Oh,
terrible.
Lordy.
Terrible.
I can't imagine sleeping
Yeah.
four side by side. So not
Yeah.
lengthwise, but the width of the bed, the kid
Yeah.
could be lined
Yes.
up.
Yes. Yes.
Oy, oy, oy.
Mm-hmm.
So but that didn't seem like hard time. That was just what you did.
It's just what we did. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know you as a person, as a lover of books, and a person who
Oh, yes.
has been a great reader and a supporter of reading programs all your life. Where did you get that? Where did that come from? Was that from your parents?
My mother, we grew up, she read stories to us before we ever went to school. And they felt that if we ever did anything in life, we had to be good readers. And, of course, that was one escape for us, too, was to read a good book. And so I always had a book in my hand.
That was the end of part 2 of our interview with Laverne Bubbles Starbuck. For more on Laverne's story, please go to part 3.